All right. The college football playoff is set.
Oh,
and
no.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Hey, you know what? Get them in
and
while you can.
Hey, look, me and Q have been on the same page the entire show, and I know this is where we're going to go wrong.
Listen,
here we go.
Get them in while you can, because this is the last year we're really going to be able to have a serious debate about a team that can legitimately make the case that they should be one of the 4 best not getting in, and that would be Florida State.
Can I give you just some firsts, all right? Because maybe it's not very well known. So here's the tough part for the committee. They were going to have to do things that were unprecedented, and they did things that were unprecedented in the 10-year span we've had the college football playoff. They had to choose between either not having an SEC champ as a part of the college football playoff. They've always had one. Or not having an undefeated conference champ. They've always had an undefeated Power 5 conference champ. All right? They were going to have to move a couple of teams in the final rankings up further than they've ever moved them. And in this case, Alabama to 4 and Texas to 3. That's further than they ever moved them in one single spot. And in fact, they've never dropped a team that was number 1 outside the top 4 when they had the penultimate rankings to the final ranking. So there was a lot of things that occurred where I feel like there's a ton of pressure on the College Football Playoff Committee to make this work. So in the end, it wasn't an easy decision, and we can debate about it all we want, but I'll generally just start off by saying this, all right? If you tell every single team of every Power 5 conference, look, boys, here's the goal. We go undefeated. We're going to be in it to play for a national championship. Is that currently true in college football?
Clearly it's not.
And why is that?
Well, obviously.
Well, it's an easier answer than maybe where you're about to go. How many Power 5 conferences were there coming into this college football playoff?
Coming in?
Yeah.
4.
No, 5.
It's Power 5, but only 4
hold on. No, that's the point. Is even if you had undefeated Power 5 champions from all 5 conferences.
Correct.
Someone gets left out.
Now, that's true.
And so the reason why I bring that up is because this has never been fair. I've said this since day one when they created a 4-team playoff and you had 5 Power 5 conferences. There was an illusion, this whole thing concocted by ESPN and this college football playoff committee, it was all for TV, folks. Like, any of you who are going to take this ridiculous stance of how upset you are, and I work with Danny Cannell. He's a huge Florida State, obviously, alum and supporter, and he was all emotional about it. Like, I get it. I feel awful for those players. I feel awful. I said yesterday when I was working, I said, look, the worst part about this is at some point, Jordan Travis is probably going to feel awful like his injury impacted this, which it did, but, like, it's out of his control. And yet, like, he puts out a tweet where you're going, no, man, like you shouldn't feel that way. So it's awful for Mike Norvell. It's awful for Florida State. But there's also this, like, illusion that it was ever going to be fair and equitable in the first place to teams. It never has been. I mean, hell, the very first year, because the Big 12 Conference couldn't figure out who their one true champion was because they had co-champions between TCU and Baylor. Guess what happened? Neither got in. And instead, Ohio State, who had a backup quarterback named Cardale Jones, who wiped the floor with Wisconsin 59-0, ended up getting put in. And what happened that year? They went on to win a national championship. To me, the biggest difference was you did not see that from Florida State since Jordan Travis's injury. I know we want to look at their body of work, but if we're being honest, you can't, because they're just not the same team. And the College Football Playoff Committee has put that. It's on their website. If you don't believe me, go look it up.
No, it's up there.
It's
up
best
there.
4 teams, and it says if key players are unavailable and there's no one more key than a quarterback, and if he was playing, they probably would be in. But the way they've looked without him.
If he's in, who's out?
If he's in, who's
Texas.
out?
Texas?
It probably would have been Bama, actually.
You think so?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because they beat them head-to-head.
Because Texas had them. It would have been Florida State at 3 and Texas at 4. Which, by the way, as soon as they revealed Texas at 3, it was done.
Yeah.
They didn't need to go through the antics of 5 and 4, because once they put Texas there, I was like, oh,
you knew Alabama had to be in.
They had to be behind them.
One SEC team.
And if you were going to put Florida State in, you would have put them at 3, and you would have put then a one-loss conference champ in Texas at 4 and Bama at 5. So that it was already a wrap. But I will say this: the comments from Boo Corrigan, who when he gave you the tea leaf of what ultimately decided it. He said, we do factor in what a coach thinks as far as who I'd want to play and who I wouldn't want to play. And I would say this, if you saw the Michigan clip that went viral, they were not excited about having to play Alabama in the semifinal round. And that tells you everything you needed to know. They tried to make this a made-for-TV show. They tried to put together the best 4 teams they thought could play off based on their criteria and however they want to justify it to play off for a national championship. It's not fair. I understand that the sadness and everything from Florida State, but if we're being honest with ourselves, it'll be more competitive games now with these 4 teams.
I don't buy it. I know you took the 11 of the 12 to explain it, but in 1 minute I'll say I don't buy it. If a team is going to have the ability to recruit and the opportunity to bring in elite players to their program, you should be able to bring them in under the premise that if you do everything we tell you to do and you do it how you're supposed to do it.
Well, they will next year.
And you do it the right way and you go undefeated, you should have the opportunity, whether you had a significant injury take place or not. All those guys put in that hard work. All those guys put in that sacrifice, and they did what they were supposed to do. They took down everybody that was lined up in front of them. And that's not the case for 2 of the teams that are in the playoff. Whether we want to call them – 2 have 1 loss. Well, 2 of the teams that are in the playoff. Hold on. I'm just giving my reasoning. You had your time. I just want to take 2 minutes to say.
Well, no, I'm asking why would you bump out those 2?
Well, because they have a loss. They have a loss, and I'm looking at the fact that you have a team.
So who are you going to put in? So hold on. You're going to put in Florida State. I get that.
Yes.
Who would you put in outside of Florida State? Liberty?
Well, no. I'm not. Liberty is what conference is Liberty in?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not worried about
13-0 though.
I'm not worried about Liberty getting in. That doesn't bother me one bit. That they're not on the level of
who is your 4 teams? Who would
Florida
you put in?
Florida State would need to go in. And whoever lost that, the fact that you had 2 teams that played head to head and one lost to the other one, then the other one should be out. I think there's more of a symptom of we heard Saban say last year, tell me one team that's in the playoff that we're not better than. And he made a real big stink about it. I think stuff like that exists. They won in the championship round. God bless. You won the SEC. But if you're asking me, is Alabama better than Georgia? They were better than them in that game. Are they better than them overall? I don't think too many people gave Alabama a shot at beating Georgia.
To your point, Georgia would probably be favored versus everyone who's in the playoff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how are we saying we got the 4 best teams in there? Because Georgia's probably better than Texas.
I think that's where you're missing what I'm saying is.
No, I got you. I totally understand what you're saying. I'm just saying, for me, from the humanistic side of it, that's wild as hell to be at Florida State. Florida State. That's like saying, Q, you're at Notre Dame and y'all went undefeated, and because of X, Y, and Z factors, you don't get to play for a national title because you're not considered to be the best team.
Yeah, and here's what I'd say to that is, we don't play a conference championship game, so Notre Dame understands that there's no guarantee in this format that they would get a shot, even as undefeated as playing for a championship, because they don't have that 13th game indicator. It's in the criteria. It's not there. And in the years that they've had 1 loss, you always feel like it's huge behind the 8 ball because you don't have that undefeated season that gives you that shot. So I understand the point you're making. What I'm trying to hammer home to people is This has never been about absolutely getting the best 4 teams.
That's correct. And
it's always been about
that.
justifying with a made-for-TV event how they get these 4 teams.
So again, maybe I should have worded it differently. I buy what you're saying based off of the premise of what the information is that's given. I just don't subscribe to the fact that you bring a 4-team playoff. And I always thought it was like when we first did the championship series where you took the top two teams and they played for the national title. It was like, what if more than 2 teams go undefeated? Like when I was in school, we used to have those conversations. Like, I wonder how that would work. If more than 2 teams go undefeated, like an Alabama goes undefeated, if we were able to go undefeated, if a Florida State goes undefeated because they were like the top team, one of the top teams, if a Big East team went undefeated, like we ended up having Virginia Tech play Florida State in the national title my last year in school. We had those debates back then, but now it just seemed more egregious to me. It seemed more egregious. And listen, it's the last year that this is going to happen because they're expanding the field. So the debate is null and void anyway. But
no, we'll still debate about which 12 teams get in and which ones don't. I
just think this year for Florida State, that sucks really bad. Really bad.
I looked at it like this. If Florida State wanted to get in, there was a process. And
they had to beat the crap out of Louisville, and they looked awful.
And once
they looked awful.
Once Alabama beat Georgia, it was over because you can't. An SEC champ was getting in, and Greg Sankey was a blowhard on game day talking about, well, it's not the real world, thinking an SEC team wasn't going to get into the college football playoff. They were always going to get in, and once Alabama beat Georgia, you couldn't put Alabama in and leave Texas out because they beat them head to head, and that was it.
If I'm an ACC team, I better start looking at the Big Ten and the SEC. If you're anybody else, you better start looking around.
Well, let me put it this way for you. If you look into the future, which teams currently are represented by what conference?
Yeah, the SEC and the Big Ten.
That's right.
Yeah,
like you literally have current conference
Washington
members
is going,
and future conference members from each.
Absolutely.
And look, I'm not saying that necessarily played a role in all this.
But that's what it needs to be. Like, let's just stop playing around with it. Like, if you're not in one of those, if you're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, forget about it. Well, create your own playoff. Create your own.
and maybe they do. Maybe this, maybe this like frustration actually leads to whatever it leads to.
Yeah, create your own playoff.
Realignment.
Delaware just got their asses handed to them by Montana in a playoff game at the major Division I level.
How'd Keno play?
Hey, he didn't play much. Shouts out to the D coordinator.
No.
Well, anyway, he could have did a little better than what they were doing, but they got their asses drug in a playoff game. That's all I'm saying. There's playoffs in the college rankings and the ranks.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. Everyone wants to look at comparative analysis of, the ACC this year, that conference, or the SEC versus other conferences. Like, we can do all that. Like, I get it. The ACC was 6-4, I think, versus other Power 5 conferences, versus the SEC in particular. And the SEC the SEC was 7-9 this year, and they're non-conference. It's like, I get it. We can do all of that. Like, we can, and we can continue to moan and complain and say it's unfair. But at the end of the day, Florida State still had an opportunity. Their defense played great. Their offense didn't. And by the way, I don't even know that their defense played over. Louisville honestly played and looked so bad in that game offensively. Like, they're in particular, Jack Plummer did not play well. And I feel bad saying this. He's a college quarterback. But there were so many plays that were there to be made that weren't. I'm watching it with our crew, and I looked at everyone and I said, this is going to hurt the perception of the ACC. Like, Louisville and their offensive play, and you could say, it's Jared Verse and the pressure. There was a 4th and 1, easy dump off to the tight end, just get it over the Florida State defender, and it would have been a first down, big gain, and barely clears the dude's arm, gets knocked down. Right? There's the interception after the block punt. Just inexcusable. Just kick the field goal on first down the way that game was going. I mean, there was time and time again, there was opportunities where Louisville probably could have done more if they actually just could execute a little bit. And it wasn't like guys weren't open and stumbling over their feet. It was unbelievable. It was an ugly, ugly game.
It hurt. Experts picked them to win.
It hurt the perception. It hurt the perception of, I think, Florida State and the ACC as a whole.
I would have been curious to see, had Georgia beat Bama and it came down to basically Texas and Florida State. Had Florida State, to Brady's
Florida
point,
State would have gotten in.
If you think they're straight up,
See,
the
I don't
results
think-
being what they were, I still think.
I think so.
Because they would have had to have looked impressive and they would have had to have looked dominant. And that game was a rough watch, man. Like, the Big Ten championship game wasn't all that hot either.
Well, that was the other thing. Everyone wants to compare, like, oh, look at Michigan's offense versus Iowa. I'm like, well, first off, it's a better defense. Like, if you really want to compare
Iowa's defense,
Louisville's defense to Iowa.
Gangsters, dog.
Yeah.
They be trying to hold up for that whack-ass offense they be having. They be holding up, boy. Golly. They gave people the blueprint. If I'm Alabama, that first half, they gave them the blueprint as to how you beat Michigan.
I'm telling you right now. What's Alabama's odds to win? Plus 210, I think, to win it?
Yeah, I think so.
That's the last time I saw it. It's going to be Alabama
Michigan.
and Texas and in a rematch for the national championship.
They might smoke Michigan because if you got better players on Alabama than you do on Iowa. And they show it. And I was saying it when I was watching them play all year. Why are people not playing it the way that Iowa was playing it? When I was watching that game, like, all you got to do is set the point against Michigan. Like, why are people allowing themselves to get outflanked and losing the running backs on the inside, and then they pop out on the outside? Like, your backers has got to slide. And let me tell you something. Iowa played that mess to a T.
They did, man.
To a T. It was so beautiful the way that they were filling in their gaps and being where they were supposed to be, but just not enough offense, man.
Dude, think about the 2 touchdowns that were scored against them. One was off a punt return.
Yeah.
The other one was off a arguable, you could make the case it should have been incomplete pass. And then even the way they stopped the play and on the sack, I guess you'd say fumble or the forced fumble and Michigan recovering. I mean, that's how they got 14 of those points.
By the way, that hustle play by number 4 for Iowa.
Number 4 for Iowa. That was incredible.
Jesus, man. Like, it literally was the first guy down and the guy to make the tackle, too, on a long punt return and saved a touchdown.
Show your kids that one, man.
They play some
by the way, let me say this.
Defense,
if we clip this stuff off, this conversation, and we don't put the whole thing in for Fox Sports Radio, I'm through with this stuff. Like, because I know Lee and all the people behind the scenes are going to try to clip off the most controversial part instead of incorporating the whole thing.
Yeah,
like, incorporate the whole conversation, Lee, and whoever clips this crap off.